Hey there, viewer! Let's go over the mysteries of the Cabin Fever campsite before we dive deeper into the labs. Episode 4, the Cabin Fever episode, is what really got me into Murdertrone's theory making. There are so many little secrets, and it took several months for the fans to find everything. In fact, I'm willing to bet everyone here will learn at least one new thing. At the beginning of the episode, we see that our characters arrive at a camp with a very strange name, 98.7, established in 3002, which means it's been 69 years from the current timeline. Later in the episode, we see many machines, towers, and computer rooms across the camp. This almost makes me think that this camp used to be some kind of radio station before it became a campsite, and then later a laboratory. But I'll talk more about that later. During the ending of episode 5, we can see that the gang can reach the campsite on their own fairly quickly, which made me wonder why and how did Uzi's class end up in this situation. We know that Uzi was asking around and looking for clues, so maybe at some point she asked her teacher about the camp, and that's when he decided to take the whole class to that location, because he was very upset with them and he was probably hoping they would get hurt. And I do think this is the case because I don't think Uzi would normally want to take them on that expedition, but as her teacher has power over the class, she was forced into going with this plan. And this alone is a bit of an interesting fact. It's weird to think that almost a year has passed since episode 3 and 4, and Uzi has been going to school this whole time. Personally, I would have dropped out by that point. Immediately, the whole episode starts off with a weird sense of paranoia. The characters don't seem to be communicating directly like they normally would, while keeping their original intentions vague for some reason. We have seen this before in Uzi's sticky notes about not trusting anyone, and after the prom incident, the characters are probably on edge and paranoid about who is who, and how quickly they can turn into a threat. Now that we know more about the story, it's really funny to see the characters be afraid of the same thing as the main villain. This episode also has a lot of camera shots that are shown from different perspectives, some of them from a distance, almost as if we are seeing the characters from the perspective of someone hiding. When Uzi starts looking for clues, we see the dresses that the drone's test subjects wear, which I find interesting for some reason. And then we get confirmation of Copper 9's 13th month, Sarah Morris. If Copper 9 only has 13 months, then I find it fitting to the story for reasons I will remain vague about until the next episode. Based on the calendar, we can conclude that the explosion happened on the 28th of Sarah Morris. And then we get the infamous Ghost Tessa shot. That for some reason took the fandom almost a year to notice. Heck, I bet someone here is seeing it for the first time. Immediately, Uzi loses sight of the entity and we see Sin's hand, almost as if Sin went over to check on who was there. After the entity leaves, we can see multiple chains in the room, which is really weird. At the time, chains were synonymous with Tessa, but later we see that the test subjects were being held by chains down in the labs, so perhaps the more trusting subjects were allowed to be in the campsite so long as they were chained to their room. Or perhaps this room really does have something to do with Tessa. It's really strange that Sin, or who we think is Sin, was staring at the corner of the room, almost as if they were remembering something. Eventually, V shows up to point out that their original intentions are to capture Doll. Perhaps they knew if the whole class made the trip that maybe someone would text or say something to tip off Doll. This could explain the paranoia and distrust of the other students from the start of the show. Then, Uzi discovers the hideout of a dead Solver user, or at least one of the early test subjects. She's wearing a test subject gown and is surrounded by what I assume is her own mad ramblings. We can also see tally marks that show she was hiding for several days before she succumbed to her wounds, probably caused by the Sentinels. Immediately, we see one of my favorite ramblings, where we are shown the current form of Sin. This would later foreshadow the twist in episode 7. We also get some other minor clues and hints, like the Sentinel nails and the key bug, but I'll go into more details on the bug much later. Then we get confirmation the doll is there. making it at least 2 different people watching our characters from the shadows. This one in particular is very in your face to clue in on the viewers that they should be looking in the background for things. At this point, Uzi has been getting hungry for oil, and that is to be expected due to how much she has been using the solver. However, I would like to argue that using the solver only makes the drones hungry for oil because of how much heating is involved. This is important to keep in mind because in our next scene, we get the first serious signs of some kind of corruption happening to Uzi with the strange slug creature. If you look closely, you can see her solver turn yellow momentarily. I don't think this is happening because of the usage of the solver. Instead, I think it's happening because of her close proximity to Sin in this episode. I think Sin is watching from the dark and is trying to get Uzi killed by having her antagonize the others.
We need to sneak this far just to make out?
It's about mood, Darren.
We were so close to seeing drones kissing. Absolutely love that laugh.
I love being incontinent. A delight to the senses. Isn't it, my friend? Isn't it? Yes. I'll have what I'm having. I'll have what I'm having. So good. It's so good.
In the next scene, En is trying to find Uzi, but if you pay attention, you can see that he's following someone else's footprints. He also walks inside what seems like some kind of communications room. The building is connected to a massive tower that has sophisticated equipment. Perhaps this was the original 98.7 station. In this room, with En, you can see 2 other entities that are likely Sin. The first is the extended human hand watching En from the corner of the room, and the second is the mysterious yellow eyes that watch En from his back. It's still unclear if this is the Sin we currently know. I find it quite odd that her eyes are not X's. It's also safe to say that the VHS tape was some kind of trap to take control of En once again. If you rewind, you will see that the VHS tape was not there before, so it's likely the solver can corrupt non-sentient data. During En's vision, we see a massive black hole in the sky above the mansion. It's likely that this is about to happen in episode 8. More on this later. I love the munching noises. And that's pretty much the main details I wanted to go over. I think we're ready to dive into the undergrounds. I'll see you there.